I'm Eleanor Handley. I played Kate in Taming of the Shrew in 2016. My first summer at Penn Shakes was 2011, which is mad to think about now. I was thinking that hopefully when we're all together again next year, it will be 10 years. So that's wild. My first summer was Comedy of Errors, and then the first ever hit and run, which was Two Noble Kinsmen, which was magical. And from there, a bunch of others. I think I've done 6 out of the last 8 seasons, stopping only to get married and have a baby. And yeah, Kate was in 2016. And certainly, though no one likes to play favourites, she's up there. I never wanted to play Kate. I had a lot of people assume it was my dream role, or one of them. I think if you're a Beatrice and a Regan and a Maggie the Cat, people sort of, there's a category of strong female roles, and Kate's certainly in there. And no, I did not want to play her. It seemed incredibly complicated. It seemed difficult to get through it without people having all sorts of opinions about how you did it. So no, I saw no real reason to revisit one of the earlier and in my previous opinion, lesser works. And I probably wouldn't have had Matt Pfeiffer not been at the helm. But it occurred to me that if I ever was going to dive in, it should be in partnership with him. Matt and I hadn't worked together. I had seen his production and collaboration with Alex Bechtel of Two Gents and loved it. It was so warm and fresh and clever and sensory. And that, I mean, that to me as a player, I had never paid much attention to. Well, the first thing Matt did was call me before the season, once the casting had happened, and say, let's have lunch. I want to chat about Kate, which actually is more unusual than it should be. I mean, as soon as he invited me to meet, it seemed like, well, of course, how else would you begin a process like this? So he came down to Bristol where I was doing another show. And it was a day where I had 2 shows. And I said, I can meet you between the matinee and the evening performance, which, as anybody can imagine, and as every actor knows, is a particularly exhausting day. Usually you just sort of eat and sleep and reset. But I thought, we'll have a quick coffee, we'll say hi. And 3 hours later, I said, I have to go back to the theatre. I have to do the second performance. So it goes when you're talking Shakespeare and most things with Matt Pfeiffer. But I think that was the beginning. And it was this electric kind of conversation where we realized, I won't speak for him, but I realized we are totally on the same page. And some of my impulses and instincts and fears about this were so aligned with his.
Importune me no farther, for how I firmly am resolved, you know, that is not to bestow my youngest daughter before I have a husband for the elder. If either of you both loves Katerina, because I know you well and love you well, leave shall you have to court her at your pleasure.
To court her, rather? She's too rough for me. They're both against you. Would you any wife?
I pray you, mother. Is it your will to make a stale of me amongst these mates?
Mates, maid? How mean you that? No mates for you unless you were of gentler, milder mold.
In faith, sir, you shall never need to fear. If it is not halfway to her heart. But if it were, doubt not her care should be to comb your noddle with a 3-legged stool, and paint your face, and use you like a fool.
I was scared of winking at the show itself and the character of Kate. I was scared of shying away from the realness of her ugliness and anger and her flaws. I didn't want her to be a victim. I didn't think she was a victim, and I didn't think a lot of what she does is excusable. And I thought it was okay to say, yeah, she's not right all the time. She's not the victim of a system. She's strong enough to be responsible for that stuff as well. So yeah, I was mostly interested in going in a straight line towards a full picture of her. Beatrice and Benedict relationship is one that people are familiar with, of these, keenly matched wits who find each other in these two puzzle pieces, who get to enjoy each other and find a way to do that lovingly at the end. Whereas I think Kate and Petruchio, the question mark is, what is their reconciliation? How much of herself does she give up? And is that appealing? And can you get the audience rooting for that?
But here she comes. And now, Petruchio, speak. Good morrow, Kate. For that's your name, I hear.
Well, have you heard? But something hard of hearing? They call me Katerina, that you talk of me.
Oh, you lie, in faith. For you are called Plain Kate, and Bony Kate, and sometimes Kate the Curse, but Kate... Oh, the prettiest Kate in Christendom. Kate of Kate Hall. My super dainty Kate.
Ian Merrill Peakes and I had not worked together before. I had worked with Karen, so we knew each other. We knew of each other. But I think what the fun part of this process was getting to meet as actors as well, and sort of sniff around each other, and he's very game for that, and I'm very game for that, and he's an incredibly generous energy. So I think what was really clear to me is that the audience needs to want them to get together, and that's not about dialogue, and it's not about the story. It's just that to me was the chemical component of it. They just need to feel like, mad as they both might be, they belong together. And I think Ian's generosity of energy, even from that first moment, sort of building in this pause and this beat where they could take each other in. I mean, Matt really let us stretch that within an inch of its life, but I think before we said a single piece of dialogue to each other, you got to see that these two people had never encountered that other energy in their lives before. And so then, and then you also have somebody who's just a very seasoned and he's a, and wonderful performer who's done a lot of fighting himself. So whether it was fighting or screaming or dancing or he is very willing to give and to receive. So yeah, it was great.
I knew you at the first. You were immovable.
Why, what's immovable?
A joint stew.
Thou hast hit it. Come, sit on me.
Asses are made to bear, and so are you.
Women are made to bear, and so are you.
No such jade as you, if need be.
Alas, good Kate, I will not burden thee, for knowing thee to be but young and light.
Too light for such a swain as you to catch, and yet as heavy as my weight should be.
Should buzz.
Oh, well ta'en, and like a buzzard.
Oh, come, you wasp. In faith, you are too angry.
If I be waspish, best beware my sting.
My remedy is then to pluck it out.
Aye, if the fool could find it where it lies.
Why, who knows not where a wasp does wear his sting? In his tail?
In his tongue.
Whose tongue?
Yours, if you talk of tails, and so farewell.
What, with my tongue in your tail?
Ian tapped into something that maybe not every Petruchio does, I'm not sure, but he managed to be vulnerable. He managed you saw somebody not sure she was going to return his affections, or and I think in allowing in that, I might not win. I might get left or trampled on it's not a word. Not, you know, I think letting the vulnerability in and that thing of this might not turn out. I'm normally so in control, but here I am in some ways just a man, you know, and I think not being afraid to show that fear and that weakness made his strength and his bravado that much funnier, you know. And Eric Hissam played just the incredible clown. Dan Hodge, Alex, the clowning parts. Carl Woolnow, of course, gosh, masterclass in clowning. There were, you know, it's so funny because I look back and some of the bits that I'm remembering are not in the play, right? Matt allows an incredible freedom in his process. So Alex wrote music or found music and applied music, and there were songs written for the show that I, you know, remember Carl doing this love song to Bianca that brought the house down every night, lots of ad libs and all of that sort of thing. But even as I'm remembering that, I really feel like we were honest and true about the script. You know, so that stuff really supported it and energized it and made it joyful and wondrous to go on the journey without pretending that we were doing some other play. So I think that was the gift of the ensemble and the process.
Come. It's not look so sour.
It is my fashion when I see a crowd.
Here's no crowd, and therefore look not sour.
Oh, there is.
Show it me.
Had I a glass, I would.
What? You mean my face?
Oh, well aimed of such a young one.
Now, by St. George, I am too young for you.
Yet you were with it.
It is with care.
I cannot.
I hear you, Kate. In sooth, you skate not so.
I take you if I tarry. Let me go.
No, wit. I find you passing gentle. Oh! It was told me you were rough, and coy, and sullen, and now I find report a very liar, for thou art pleasant, gamesome, passing courteous, but slow in speech, yet sweet as springtime flowers. Thou canst not frown, thou canst not look askance, nor bite thy lip as angry wenches will. Nor hast thou pleasure to be cross and talk, but thou with mildness entertainst thy wooers, with gentle conference, soft and affable. Why does the world report that Kate doth limp?
So when it came to the fights, we worked with a brilliant guy named Dale Gerard, and there were two things that were really important to me that he know. And the first was that I wasn't shy about fight choreography, that I'd done quite a bit of it, and that I really wanted him to feel game to make sure that Kate gave worse than she got, at least worse than she got. And so that was the first thing. And then the other thing we talked about was, again, I wanted to make sure, at least with the interaction where Petruchio and Kate meet for the first time, that there was some sense of her throwing the first punch. And so we built that in a couple of ways. This is sort of incidental to anybody else, but there's a sense that a messenger has gone off to tell her, hey, there's this guy here that everyone insists you meet. So we staged a piece of business where my entrance in the first scene with Petruchio was sort of running across the stage, throwing a vase at that poor messenger, who I think was Annalise Diaz, bravely and brilliantly. So that they're meeting, so that the first opening gambit, as it were, the first impression that he has of her in the flesh, beyond what's been said about her, is that she's dangerous, that she's dangerous and she's violent and she's already fired up. And so that, that was and then when it came to the meat and the guts of that big first fight, Dale just did this great job of making it vicious and making them matched in a way that the audience could enjoy and not worry about, I think. And then, we got to play around, and this is one of those magic fairy dust moments. He had staged this piece of business that that involved, Petruchio grabbing Kate by the foot or responding to a kick by grabbing her foot, and then this lovely sort of clownish dragging her around the stage, which we got to flip and mirror in the very final moments of the play. That was Dan Hodges' idea. So I'll give him full credit there. So so that it really wove throughout the story in a way that was much greater than, here's a punch, here's a kick. It had a life and an artfulness that really helped.
I bring you from a wild Kate to a Kate conformable as other household Kates. Up, here comes your mother. Never mind. I must and will have Caterina to my wife.
Now, Signor Petruchio, how speak you with my daughter?
Oh! Albert well! Oh, sir, Albert well! It were impossible I should speed amiss.
Why, how now, daughter Caterina, in your doubts?
Call you me daughter? Oh, now I promise you, you have shown a tender motherly regard to wish me wed to one half lunatic.
But no, I do remember, I will say, on the question of casting Baptista or as a mother rather than a father, that in some ways that relieved me or us of the woman crushed by men. Is that the way I want to start saying this? Meaning, I think it allowed for what are the different colors of femininity, and what are the different ways and roles that women slot into or choose to slot into or don't fit into. And so we had not just Bianca and Kate as the soft, lovely sister who turns out to be not so much, and the opposite, but we also had that in the context of, a single parent who happened to be a mother rather than a father who just didn't know what to do with these crazy women in his house. So I think that meant I became interested in what I was talking about before, which is the idea that it's not the responsibility of one woman to represent all women, and for me, Kate was just elbowing to find room, room to express this other stuff, and doing it in really, and as I stand by this, doing it in really unproductive ways until she, and one of the fun things for me that Ian did and that his Petruchio did was sort of to hold up a very unattractive mirror to her. I mean, lots of his behavior and the way he played it was, this is what you're doing, and it's not that it's masculine or feminine or that you're not fitting into a feminine role, it's you're not pleasant to be around. And so I think I think it's interesting, when I said before about different productions relying on setting it in a very specific time or adapting it to the sort of current culture. This is a show, I mean, we're in 2020 now, a lot's happened between 2016 or summer of 2016 and just pre-November 2020, but this is a production that I would stand by. I think Matt and the team tapped into something universal and joyful and complicated that we could remount. That's my pitch. Let's remount the show. I still have the boots.
Where did you study all this goodly speech?
It is extempore from my mother wit.
A witty mother, witless else her son.
What? Oh, am I not wise?
Yes, keep you warm.
Mary, so I mean, sweet Caterina, in thy bed. And therefore, setting all this chat aside, thus, in plain terms, your mother hath consented that you shall be my wife. The dowry freedom, and will you, I will marry you. Now, Kate, I am a husband for your turn. For by this light, whereby I see thy beauty that doth make me like thee well, thou must be married to no man but me, For I am he am born to tame you, Kate. What?
Irresistibly. I think they're irresistibly in love at the end. And when I was talking before about chemicals and magnetism, yeah, it's more than puzzle pieces. They are drawn to each other in that magnetic way. And I think the fun of our ending was that you didn't think they were changed. You just thought they were going to be their particular brand of crazy together. And I think the rest of the cast did a really good job of going, who are these people? We don't get. I mean, and we had this moment of me, grabbing his leg up, as I was saying, to mirror that piece at the beginning. And then just as quickly it resolved in a madly passionate kiss. And I think the violence and the passion and the wit and the anger and, the game playing, their mess just happened to suit both of them. So yeah, I do. I don't think the play, well, I'm not interested in the play that says otherwise, in the version of the play that says otherwise, even though you can. I mean, I've seen it. It just, you leave the theatre thinking, ugh, I need a wash. And my experience of the festival in general is that beauty and joy and love and that those are the things we're striving for. So I can't speak for exactly what the audience was feeling, but I know that that the feedback loop and what it felt like we were sort of putting out there and receiving back was just this sense of release and hope and catharsis. So yeah, and I think you earn that more powerfully by going dark or allowing the dark and the ugly and the complex of humanity to be there, and then finding a way through it with community and ensemble and communion, I guess, with the audience. And I'm going to make myself cry as I talk about it, because I think that's what this, as much as I'm so pleased to be connecting with you today, that's what this can't simulate. Having said that I never wanted to play Kate, it becomes really remarkable as you move through something, how much you start to feel and find things of, your own life and your own experience. And to give you a sort of a superficial example of that, I will share an anecdote that my husband shared mostly with other people, but I've since been told that that during the wedding scene each night, he would be moved emotionally to tears by the sight of me in the dress that Olivera created, which I think she'd based on Kate Middleton's epically beautiful dress, but that did share similarities with my wedding dress. I think that whole wedding scene was so, the fact that Fife allowed it to be so beautiful, right? Because the wedding's complicated in this show. The last thing you see is her, I think I bit him.
We will be married a Sunday. Yep.
This epic fight that ends in me biting his face. So the question mark becomes, how do they end up at the altar? Why? What happens between that? And in the script, what happens is a scene with Bianca, right? But Fife beautifully and I think brilliantly decided to stage a sort of interstitial montage scene that told the story of the night before, so that you got to see Kate packing up to run away and seeing the dress, actually speaking of that beautiful dress, and making a decision to stay. And then you got to see Ian looking to suit up respectably like a groom and making the decision to come dressed as a lion. So, or rather, and I like to think of it, making the decision to signal you're safe here. Like I will out crazy you. There is nothing. There is nothing to be afraid of. I will give you the extremes that you crave. So anyway, the wedding became this, beautiful, backed by this piece of music that Alex had chosen and that Ilya sang so beautifully. And I'll never forget the rehearsal where I first got to hear it. They'd been rehearsing it off in another space. And so my first experience of it was, okay, we're doing the wedding, and this music started ringing out. And speaking of being in tears, I was so moved, and it was so beautiful, and I was so happy to be there. And I thought, but yeah, why not? Why can't that be that she's hopeful?
The hearts of men, the arms of mothers, the parts we play, convinced others.
It was such a special time and a special team and a special production for a number of reasons. And I think one of the joys of the festival generally is that with the sort of lives that weave together and keep coming back, you have a shared history, and that can't help but obviously leak onto the stage in really delightful ways. And one of the things, or a couple of things, were going on with this particular production. It was the 25th anniversary year, and Father Schubert, who is the founder and reason the festival exists, had passed away in the December before the summer, and so it was the first time he wouldn't, his physical presence wasn't felt, but certainly I think his presence, his spiritual presence, his legacy was felt. And it was Taming of the Shrew was the first production the festival ever did. So we sort of were aware that there was this beautiful tribute, and that one of the ways, or one of the things I remember touching every night, because for those of you who saw it, you'll remember that Matt had the troupe arrive on the stage and ready ourselves in full view of the audience, which I think was just a really lovely nod to the inherent theatricality of Taming of the Shrew and naming this as a play, and we're the team that's about to perform it for you. But one of the beautiful pieces on the set was a vintage poster of an ad for Vespa. And I think, if I'm remembering the trivia correctly, and obviously a bit before my time, but I think in that original production that Father Schubert had Petruchio enter on a Vespa. And so it was just a moment for me that no one would have seen. It was up the back of the stage, but this beautiful vintage poster, and I would just check in with it before we began every night. And yeah, that was just one of the threads in a summer where there was lots going on. And of course, it's a big team and troupe of people, so real lives don't stop as we all descend on the cornfields of Penn Shakes. But in the best case scenarios, I think the richness of individual lives come together to inform and celebrate what's going on stage.